Imagine a jet so heavy and unaerodynamic that pilots joked it was proof that even a brick can fly if you stick a big enough engine on it. It had no internal gun, its wings were crooked, and it left a trail of black smoke that could be seen for miles. Yet, this double ugly became the most successful multi-service fighter in history. This is the F-4 Phantom II. From the carrier decks of the Pacific to the lethal skies of Vietnam, it dominated an entire era of warfare. Today, we're looking at the world's leading distributor of MiG parts and why this iron beast refused to be ignored. The origin of the F-4 Phantom II was born from a radical gamble by McDonnell Aircraft in the mid-1950s. At a time when the Navy wanted a simple interceptor to protect its carriers, McDonnell proposed a massive, twin-engine beast that broke every rule in the book. It was designed to be a missile-only fighter, a concept that assumed the age of the dogfight was over and that future wars would be won by pushing buttons from miles away. This philosophy led to a jet that looked like a jagged collection of titanium and steel, a brutal, powerful machine that prioritized raw thrust and radar power over the elegant lines of its predecessors. The engineering of the Phantom was a masterpiece of brute force design. To achieve the required speed and altitude, engineers fitted the F-4 with two massive General Electric J79 turbojets, producing nearly 36,000 pounds of thrust with afterburners. This gave the brick a top speed of over Mach 2.2, allowing it to climb like a rocket and outrun almost anything in the sky. Its distinctive cranked wings, with the outer tips angled upward and the tail angled downward, were a desperate but brilliant fix for stability issues discovered during testing. The result was a silhouette that was ugly to some, but terrifyingly effective to everyone else. What truly separated the Phantom from its rivals was its incredible versatility. It was originally built for the Navy, but it was so fast and carried such a massive payload that the Air Force and the Marine Corps were eventually forced to adopt it as well. It was the first true multi-role fighter, capable of acting as an interceptor, a ground attack bomber, and a reconnaissance platform. The Phantom could carry up to 18,000 pounds of weapons, more than twice the payload of a World War II B-17 Flying Fortress. It was an aerial powerhouse that proved that in the jet age, size and power were the ultimate strategic assets. The cockpit of the F-4 introduced a critical second member to the team, the Radar Intercept Officer, or RIO. In the early days of missile warfare, the radar systems were too complex for a single pilot to handle while flying at Mach 2. The RIO sat in the back, managing the powerful APQ-120 radar and searching the sky for targets long before they could be seen by the naked eye. This two-man synergy became the soul of the Phantom's lethality, creating a specialized brotherhood that would define naval and Air Force aviation for decades. It was the birth of the modern sensor-fused air combat, where the brain in the back was just as important as the hands on the stick. In its early years, the F-4 set a staggering number of world records, including altitude, speed, and climb time. It became a global symbol of American technological dominance, proving that the US could build a jet that was faster, tougher, and more heavily armed than anything coming out of the Soviet Union. It was the big stick of the Cold War, a machine that radiated power and industrial might. However, the true test of the Phantom's missile-only philosophy was about to come in the humid, sand-filled skies of Southeast Asia, where reality would soon clash with the theories of the Pentagon. When the F-4 officially entered service in 1960, it was hailed as the future of warfare. It was a high-tech interceptor designed for a high-tech age, but beneath the radar and the missiles, it was still a rugged, old-school brawler. It was built to survive the bone-shattering landings on carrier decks and the intense heat of continuous afterburner use. The Phantom was a machine of fire and titanium, a heavy metal predator that was about to find its true destiny in the longest and most difficult air war in American history. The lead sled was ready for its baptism of fire, and the world was about to see what happens when you let a brick fly. The Vietnam War was the definitive crucible for the F-4 Phantom. In the skies over Hanoi and the Ho Chi Minh Trail, the Phantom faced its greatest rival, the nimble, Soviet-built MiG-17 and MiG-21. This was a war that the F-4 wasn't originally built for. Instead of long-range missile duels, the Phantom crews found themselves in swirling, low-altitude dogfights where their lack of an internal gun became a fatal flaw. The missile-only theory collapsed in the face of unreliable early Sparrows and Sidewinders, forcing Phantom pilots to rely on their engines and their wits to survive against a much more agile enemy. To survive the knife fights with the MiGs, Phantom pilots had to learn the art of energy management. They couldn't outturn a MiG, but they could outclimb and outrun it. This led to the development of vertical tactics, where the F-4 would use its massive thrust to zoom into the clouds and then dive down on the enemy. The Phantom also became the primary tool for the Wild Weasel missions, the suicidal hunt for North Vietnamese SAM sites. Flying modified F-4GS, these crews would deliberately act as bait, inviting the enemy to fire their missiles so the Phantoms could locate and destroy the radar sites with anti-radiation missiles. One of the most legendary stories from Vietnam is the Operation BOLO, led by the charismatic Robin Olds. Recognizing that the MiGs were hunting the slower F-105 bombers, Olds equipped his F-4 Phantoms with the same electronic signatures as the bombers, luring the North Vietnamese Air Force into a trap. When the MiGs rose to attack what they thought were easy targets, they found a wolf pack of Phantoms waiting for them. In a single afternoon, Olds and his men destroyed 7 MiGs without losing a single aircraft. It was a masterpiece of tactical deception that proved that even a brick could be a surgeon's tool in the hands of a genius. The technical evolution of the F-4 in Vietnam led to the creation of the F-4E, the version that finally added a 20mm M61 Vulcan internal cannon. Pilots had been begging for a gun for years, and once the fabulous Phantom had its teeth, it became even more lethal. The addition of the gun, along with improved slats for better maneuvering, turned the F-4 into a true air superiority fighter. The Phantom crews began to rack up an impressive kill-to-loss ratio, proving that the heavy jet could hold its own in a dogfight if given the right tools. It was a brutal education in the necessity of versatility on the modern battlefield. Protection for the Phantom came from its sheer ruggedness. It was a massive jet that could absorb a staggering amount of damage and still bring its crew home. There are countless reports of Phantoms returning to base with entire sections of their tail missing or with one engine completely destroyed by a SAM hit. The J-79 engines were reliable workhorses that kept pushing even when riddled with shrapnel. For the crews, the Double Ugly wasn't just a plane, it was a life insurance policy. They knew that if they got hit, the F-4 had the structural integrity of a tank, a trait that earned it the undying respect of everyone who ever strapped into its cockpit. By the end of the war, the F-4 had accounted for more MiG kills than any other aircraft in the U.S. arsenal. It had proven its worth as a bomber, an interceptor, and a defender. But the war also revealed the Phantom's limits. Its massive black smoke trail made it easy to spot from miles away, and its size made it a large target for anti-aircraft guns. The lessons of Vietnam, the need for a gun, better visibility, and higher agility, would lead directly to the development of the next generation, including the F-15 and F-16. But for over a decade, the F-4 had been the iron fist of American air power, a machine that fought through fire and lead to secure its place in history. While the F-4 Phantom was making history in the jungles of Vietnam, it was also becoming the primary strategic weapon for the Israeli Air Force in the Middle East. Known in Israel as the Kurnas, or sledgehammer, the F-4 was the perfect tool for a small nation surrounded by enemies. Its long range and massive payload allowed the Israelis to strike deep into hostile territory, hitting Egyptian and Syrian airfields with devastating precision. The Phantom wasn't just a fighter for Israel, it was a psychological hammer that proved no target was out of reach. In the hands of some of the world's most aggressive pilots, the F-4 was transformed into a lethal instrument of national survival. During the 1973 Yom Kippur War, the Phantom faced its most brutal trial. The skies over the Suez Canal were filled with the most advanced Soviet-made surface-to-air missiles in the world. Israeli F-4 crews flew suicidal missions to destroy these missile batteries, often flying at treetop level through a literal wall of fire. The Kurnas took heavy losses, but it kept coming back. Its heavy armor and twin-engine reliability allowed many pilots to survive hits that would have vaporized any other jet. The Phantom proved that even in the age of the missile, raw toughness and a massive payload were the only things that could break a determined defense. The F-4's combat record in the Middle East was staggering. Israeli Phantoms were credited with hundreds of aerial victories against Soviet-made MiGs, proving once again that the heavy brick could dominate the sky if flown with superior tactics. The Israeli pilots mastered the art of the phantom turn, using the jet's massive thrust to maintain energy in a dogfight. They also used the F-4 as a primary reconnaissance platform, flying high-speed runs over enemy capitals at Mach 2, capturing vital intelligence while the enemy's interceptors struggled to even reach their altitude. The Phantom was the eyes and the sword of Israel for over 2 decades. One of the most unique aspects of the F-4's service in the Middle East was its role in long-range electronic warfare. As the Soviets provided more advanced radar systems to the Arab nations, the Israelis modified their Phantoms with secretive, homegrown jamming pods and sensors. The F-4 became a flying laboratory, capable of blinding enemy radars and clearing the way for other strike aircraft. This constant evolution showed the incredible adaptability of the Phantom's airframe. It was large enough and powerful enough to carry almost any new piece of technology the engineers could dream up, keeping it relevant long after its original design should have been obsolete. In other parts of the region, the Iranian Air Force also became a major operator of the F-4, using them with lethal effect during the long Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s. Iranian Phantoms performed daring strikes on Iraqi oil facilities and even engaged in rare air-to-air duels with Iraqi MiGs and Mirages. Despite a crippling arms embargo, Iranian mechanics managed to keep their Phantoms flying through sheer ingenuity and cannibalization of parts. The fact that the F-4 could remain a potent threat in such isolated conditions is a testament to its rugged, industrial-grade construction. It was a jet built to last, no matter how many shells or years were thrown at it. By the late 1980s, the Phantom began to be replaced by the F-15 and F-16 in the premier air superiority roles, but it refused to fade away. It remained in service as a heavy bomber and a specialized suppression of enemy air defenses (SEAD) platform. The veterans of the Middle Eastern wars remembered the F-4 not as a double ugly brick, but as the machine that had held the line in the darkest hours of their history. It was a 20-ton legend that had earned its place in the pantheon of aviation greats, a machine that had proven its worth in the most intense air-to-air and air-to-ground combat since the end of World War II. As the world entered the 1990s, the F-4 Phantom II was officially a relic of a bygone era, yet it still had one final act of American service left. During Operation Desert Storm in 1991, the F-4G Wild Weasel was the only aircraft the U.S. Air Force trusted to hunt down and destroy Iraqi radar sites. While much newer jets like the F-15 and F-16 were the stars of the show, they all relied on the Phantoms to kick down the door and blind the enemy's air defenses. It was a poetic conclusion to the F-4's American career. The oldest jet in the fleet was still the one the young pilots counted on to keep them safe from the deadliest missiles in the world. After its retirement from U.S. service, the Phantom's story took an even more incredible turn. Several nations, including Japan, Turkey, Greece, and South Korea, continued to fly and upgrade their F-4 fleets well into the 21st century. The Japanese Kai versions and the Turkish Terminator 2020 Phantoms were fitted with modern glass cockpits, advanced radars, and the ability to fire the latest precision-guided missiles. These Super Phantoms proved that with the right electronics, the 50-year-old lead sled could still compete with modern fourth-generation fighters. It was a display of longevity that few other aircraft in history could ever hope to match. The influence of the F-4 Phantom on modern aviation is profound and permanent. It was the aircraft that perfected the role of the multi-role fighter, a concept that now defines every modern jet from the F-35 to the Su-57. It taught the world that a fighter must be able to do everything, strike, intercept, and recon, in a single airframe. The lessons of its failures in Vietnam also led directly to the fighter mafia revolution and the focus on agility and internal guns in the jets that followed. The Phantom was the missing link between the primitive early jets of the 1950s and the high-tech, sensor-fused warriors of the modern era. Today, the Phantom is a beloved icon in the aviation community, often referred to fondly as the Rhino or the Old Smoker. Standing next to one in a museum, you are struck by the sheer scale of the machine. It is massive, covered in rivets, and looks like it was hammered out of solid steel rather than built from aluminum. It radiates an aura of industrial aggression that modern stealth jets lack. For the men who flew it and the mechanics who fixed it, the F-4 was a difficult, temperamental, but ultimately loyal partner. It was a machine that required a rail, stick and rudder pilot to master, a characteristic that has made it a favorite of aviation purists. Interestingly, the F-4's career ended for many as a target. In its final years of American service, hundreds of Phantoms were converted into F-4 drones, unmanned targets used to test the latest generations of missiles. It was a bittersweet end for the world's leading distributor of MiG parts, as the old warriors went out in a blaze of glory, testing the very weapons that would eventually replace them. But even as a target, the Phantom was hard to kill. Many F-4s survived multiple missile near misses, continuing to fly through sheer structural stubbornness until they were finally brought down. In the final analysis, the F-4 Phantom II was a magnificent anomaly. It was a jet that succeeded despite its flaws, proving that raw power and a massive payload can overcome almost any aerodynamic disadvantage. It was the face of American power for 3 decades, a machine that fought through the smoke of Vietnam and the heat of the Middle East to become a global legend. The sledgehammer has finally been put down, but its echo still rings through the history of the sky. The Phantom was more than just a jet, it was an era, a time of fire, titanium, and the undeniable triumph of thrust over the impossible.